I'm here this afternoon with Charles Crooks. He's the man who's been working with me for the last several years and has helped me become a very joyful person and want to help other people. He is a shaman, and people are always saying, you're working with a shaman? What is a shaman? Well, Charles Crooks is a shaman, and I'm going to ask him some questions concerning that. And one of them is a person called or born to be a shaman?
Ooh. Yes and no. You're going to have situations where somebody will come in and they'll come into a family that will allow that to manifest itself, which will be kind of obvious. But then you'll also find other situations where that talent or technique or method may not be known until the last 1/3 of their life. So it really, it's a hard question to really define.
So can somebody train to become a shaman? There is training involved in it, even if you were, what you say, you may not be born with it, but if somebody was like came into it, could they? Do they have to? Is there training involved?
Yes.
Okay, and can you tell me how old is shamanism? Is it been around for a while?
About 10,000 years, as far as I know.
Okay, how did you yourself get interested in shamanism?
In my case, I took an action that drew the attention of a couple of people, and they had different locations around configuration checks to figure out who I was. Afterwards, they had me come in and ran me through a bunch of tests, and which I didn't know what was going on, just casual tests, that type of stuff. And eventually, it was decided a year or so later, after these series of tests, to take a journey out in the desert. And therein, many things were made known to me, and also many things were returned to me.
So, when you were younger, did you know that you were going to be a shaman, or you had no idea?
No.
But you had abilities that other people did not have. Is that true?
That kept me out of trouble. I knew when it was good to go out with my buddies and goof off and party and all that. I knew that it was not good. Yeah, I had stuff like that.
So okay. So, I've also heard that, the people that most shamans have suffered a tremendous illness or have some severe hardship before becoming a shaman. And was that the case with you, or is that the case, or do you have to suffer to become a shaman?
No. However, it is a very good tool to temper things, so to speak. You have to, if you're going to build a beautiful sword, you have to beat the heck out of the metal and temper it. The same with the individual deciding to do some of the deeper work.
It's kind of like what I've heard with like counselors. They say that the best counselors are people who have gone through that situation. So a shaman helps people who are in pain. Is that correct? And so if you've been through the pain, you're probably at a better, a more beneficial spot to help other people, yes or no?
I think that's just common knowledge. It doesn't matter whether you're a shaman or not. For instance, anybody who has been through an experience and is at the point where they're comfortable and without judgment can be a great assistance to somebody else who's going through it.
Okay.
So that's all traditions.
All right. And what kind of training does it take to become a shaman? I know I've been back in your meditation room and I've seen all these plaques and things on the wall, but what kind of training did you have to become a shaman?
That's a good question. I've never really considered the goal to become a shaman to begin with, so I didn't really start out on a training system or anything with that particular goal. I did get involved in the Rosicrucian Order out of San Jose, and they were very good, and their approach was validate, validate, validate. Their actual terms, their actual statement, they said they wanted people to be walking question marks. This way, when you went through whatever they had to teach or the systems that they used, you learned it firsthand. That way you were not dependent upon the parent organization to continue. So as to training to become a shaman or want to become a shaman, nah, that never crossed my mind. To want to help society, yeah, that was kind of like it was a desire all the way from the get-go, I think.
And so that is your goal, is really to help society.
To bring society up to a higher level, yeah, and just bring about overall good tidings all the way around, I guess.
All right. And one of the things that I've heard you talk about is certain traditions. I've heard there's different traditions of shamans because, if you look online at a shaman, they'll say there's American Indian shamans, Tibetan shamans, and looking at you, you don't look American Indian, you don't look Tibetan to me. But is there a certain type of tradition of shamanism or that people adopt, or how does that work?
That's a good question. I'm tied in with the Chinese tradition because of the lineage, or in other words, because of the lineage by which I was brought up in. So I would have to say it's more along that lines. However, the Aztec and or the American Indian are not unknown to me.
And I've also heard you talk about a 10 cell. What is that, 10 cell?
Okay, there's various cells on training is done. The 10 cells most relaxed and most enjoyable. There's other cells that are very, very strict, and so it just depends. So when we do a 10 cell type class, the class is very open. Nobody's restricted as to what they may look at or what they may read. The standards, not so much the standards, but I would have to use, everything is so open that the individual can study anything and still not be out of line with the work that we're doing. So now there's no restriction. It's very open.
So that's just a different type of training, is what you're saying, and you're more of an open trainer, is what you're looking at.
For example, I'll use a process of the tower, which is a 16, which is a system I'll use. I'll also use law, which is 4, because that's in one of my configurations. So as a result, in the 10 cell, which has a lot of latitude, I'll use 4 for law, and you hear me talk about law quite a bit. And also I'll use 16, that has to do with inspiration. And what that does is it causes one to have that point of inspiration where all things are blown away that no longer support them.
So now when you're talking about numbers, as you know, I'm major into numbers.
Yes.
I'm into numerology. There are people that say that is a dark force activity. Numerology, astrology, anything like that is a dark force activity. But what would you have to say to those people?
I think that's kind of silly. I mean, after all, if it wasn't for astrologers, nobody would have known that Jesus came around.
Well,
And in fact, it was astrologers that made the prophecy that Jesus was going to come into the earth. That's why the Old Testament still exists.
but, from where my standpoint, it looks like those things, if they benefit mankind, how can they be bad for people? Do you feel that way also?
Well, it's the same mentality you have with every major religion. When there's no validation of the principles brought forth, and all it is belief, the first thing you're going to do is fear anything that threatens or that is contrary to what you believe. For example, the most recent statement by one of the religious leaders in the area basically says that you can't do yoga anymore because it's bad, but you can do exercise on the mat.
I know we're laughing because when you think it's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you've talked about do you work in more than one tradition? Do you practice like Buddhism and shamanism, or can you work in more than one tradition? Is it beneficial to do that?
Depends on what's needed at the time.
So you do what's needed.
Yeah, what's needed, yeah. So for instance, each tradition, each religious order, and I'll put it that way, has benefits. And I would like to use a comment Elvis Presley did years ago. He was having an interview, and somebody noted that he had the cross, the Star of David, and the Muslim symbol of the moon around his neck. And they asked him why he had all of them there, and he said, "I don't want to get kicked out of heaven on a technicality." So I'll have to stick with that.
Okay, I have one more question in this segment, and that is there any kind of initiation performed to become a shaman?
Yes.
Yes, and that's all you're going to say? Because is
That is correct.
Is it secret?
It's private.
It's private, not secret. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, we thank you, Charles, for being with us this afternoon. And if you want to find out more information about Charles, you can reach him on his website. And Charles, can you give us that address?
It's http://shamanic-enterprises.com.
Thanks again, Charles.
And thank you.